Hi everyone, good afternoon. I'll be sharing my slide first. Let's sort out the technology and then I'll be talking about my journey so far. Can everyone see my slides? Claire, I think you are on mute. Can you see?
Yes, they're there now.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I know it's just the day before the Easter holiday begins, and I think people have plans, but thank you for coming this afternoon to listen to our journey. So what I'll be doing is I'll be sharing a bit of my personal story back from Nepal and how I ended up in academia, and I'll be talking a little bit about my research. So I am currently a senior lecturer in public health at Brighton and Sussex Medical School. So I love talking about Nepal because I'm originally from Nepal. I think you can see the flag. It's a unique flag, actually, triangular, two triangles. You'll never forget this after this presentation. It's a beautiful country. It's a landlocked, very small country with 30 million population. It's quite famous for like Mount Everest is in Nepal. You have heard about Gurkha soldiers who work with British Army, and Buddha was born in Nepal. So it's quite, although small, it's quite famous. So that's where I come from. And a bit of my story. I like telling my story because I think when I look back, I kind of feel kind of grateful to the life I have at the moment. So that's my dad in the front photo, and that's my mom in the background, two of my brothers and one of my cousin. So we were a family, we lived in a joint family of 25, and that brick house was ours, where we all 25 people, four different, my father and his three brothers and all his children. We used to have like massive 25 people living in that inside that brick wall. So I would say we were from a lower income family. So my inspiration, and my mother never went to school, but she was really keen that we get proper education. And my father was a high school teacher, always in even though an electric iron was not there at the time, he used to iron his shirt, and like a typical teacher. And he always inspired me in academia, my spending my life in academia. It was actually his dream, and I would say I think his kind of dream came true because I am in academia at the moment. So my parents are my heroes. If I look at my academic journey, it's not very peculiar, it's kind of like very common. So I did my master's in microbiology back in Nepal in 2000. Frankly saying, I did not enjoy that master's because it was like going through the samples, specimen, cough, blood, looking through the microscope. I did not enjoy that much the lab aspect of research. And once I finished my master's, I followed my dad's trend. I went to become a teacher in a high school, science teacher. And then I wanted to study public health, but there was no public health course at the time back in Nepal. So I came to do MS in public health in Aberdeen in 2005 and completed in 2006. I was offered a research assistant post instantly. And while I was doing my research assistant post, I got a competitive scholarship in PhD in environmental medicine, which I completed in 2011. Then I was looking for a job, and from Aberdeen one end to I moved to Plymouth to another end. So I spent roughly 2 years there, and then I am here in BSMS since 2013. So it's been the longest, nearly over 9 years now. I'm currently a senior lecturer in public health. So that's my academic journey, which is not, it's kind of like a very unique. I have never worked beside academia as a teacher. I worked back in Nepal. I worked as a teacher. Here I worked as a teacher and researcher. So when I actually look at my CV and think about where I am at the moment, like earlier I used to think that like my CV is so scattered because I've done work in, respiratory health, I've done work in back pain, complementary medicine. And when people used to, in my initial early research career days, when people used to ask what research are you doing, I used to kind of struggle to say what my expertise is in, because I was into so many things. I think the thing about the early career researcher is like sometimes it's driven not by your interest, rather driven by PI's interest. And especially with me, so I worked in, I think few years as a research fellow and in research, a different research project, and that's why I think the CV looks scattered. Also, as a migrant, I had to hold my visa, and I didn't have much choice to choose job and project. Whichever job offered me visa, I think I had to go with that, and that also is one of the kind of thing which. But now, actually, like Steve Jobs says, when you look back, you have to look back to connect the dots. So when I actually look back and see my research journey, I can see that there's a pattern emerging. And my research have always focused on vulnerable and marginalized population. For example, these photos are taken by me during my PhD. So my PhD was on respiratory health of cotton textile workers, and you can see the working condition here. Covered in fluff. They're dyeing using strong chemicals without any PPE. And on this carpet, actually you see in there here. And I had asked, and they said like it's going to be exported in the UK. I don't know which department store it was in, but I think these workers work in worse conditions, and the materials are being exported in the developed countries, industrialized countries, and there is no health and safety regulations back home. So and that's my professor, Professor John Ayer, who was my PhD supervisor during the field trip in Nepal. So that was my PhD, and that's my actually first proper research. And this was also initiated because my home was right next to the garment factory. And these workers were coughing, they were like, had so many health issues. I always had thought about doing something with these workers, but never had that opportunity. And that my PhD funding, actually, with my PhD funding, I was able to do the research. And it's like I have 3 publications from my PhD, if anyone is interested to see that work. So what I'm saying is, like, I know as an early career researcher, you might be doing diverse thing, but I think it's like from the early, and I think it's important to ask that question: what am I passionate about? Where do I see myself in the future? I think that question is quite important. And my research, and it was quite late on, actually, I figured out that I want to do something around ethnicity, migration, vulnerable population, homeless population. That's what area I work in. But actually that took me a couple of years to figure out. And I found that as a migrant myself from ethnic minority background, and I feel very passionate about my current research because that's where I come from, and it's a kind of personal attachment to the research as well. So I'll share a little bit about my research project too. I'll share my 2 projects so far. The first is storytelling in public health. So my early research, I was very, very far away from, qualitative research and participatory research. Most of the research I've done in my earlier phase, it's very quantitative. But when I was more into the research, I figured out that numbers and narratives need to go hand in hand. Numbers are not just sufficient in research. And I was particularly interested in the storytelling approach. And I have used this approach in a couple of my projects so far. And I think it's quite important in storytelling, because stories are the narratives of our life. They carry our hopes and dreams, they carry our stories, and stories actually connect generations, and they span through centuries, and they connect to the generations. So I think they can be a really powerful tool in research. So what is a story? I think I'm not going to tell a lot about this, because this book by Teresa Greenhouse, it's actually freely accessible in the internet. You can have a look if you wish. So stories are actually, when I think everybody knows, when you watch a movie, like it's a story, like there's a start, there's a sequence of unfolding events, and there is ending. And there is so much action put together to make sense. And it's quite interesting. Like, one person's story told twice is never the same. That means, if I give this seminar, maybe 2 days later in some other place, I think my seminar will be quite different. And different people tell the stories about the same event, different stories about the same event. For example, this seminar today, I don't know how many people are there. I think I could see 19 people participation. And this is the same seminar talk I'm giving you to everyone, but every one of you will have different perception about this seminar. So different people have different stories about the same event. So it's quite interesting. And I think its stories are the way we make sense of the world around us. And if we, in science, if we have to give and people are not normally data driven or fact given. So if we say something about, if we saw bar diagram numbers and figures, I think people will easily forget. But if you tell a really touching story, it remains in people's mind for quite longer. Stories in a way are a sense-making device. For example, I had COVID like 2 weeks ago, and then I'm still feeling kind of rough, and then I can say, oh, I had COVID, and then I'm feeling rough, So what stories does is look back things retrospectively and trying to make to establish the causality, actually, they are sense-making device, and stories they are action-packed, laden with emotions, they are very people can remember them more than facts and figures, and they are actually quite engaging. What story does is it actually takes you to that world where you have to imagine, you have to feel, and you have to engage with the process rather than just numbers and figures, which you tend to forget quite soon. So I'll be telling about this project in Nepal, which I did with migrants workers. Claire, I don't know the timeline, so I can't see the clock. So please remind me if I'm over the time. So this again, migrant workers. So every time when I come to the UK, I have to come via Dubai or Doha. Most common route is there. And from Kathmandu, Nepal to Doha, Dubai, almost 80% of the plane is filled with migrants workers in Gulf countries, working in Gulf countries. And these workers are so timid, they don't know how to put the seat belt, and their passport in a transparent plastic bag, very nervous looking, and mostly male, majority of them are male. And every time I travel, I used to, initially when back from UK and Nepal, I used to see these migrant workers, and I always thought, I wish I could do some research in the health and well-being of these migrant workers. And that's where this project came into place. So this project we did with, it's an international project with Nepalese partners, Tribhuvan University, one of the biggest universities in Nepal, NGO in Nepal, Sussex, and BSMS. And actually the details of the project and everything, findings, everything can be found in the website I have mentioned here. So actually, why migrant workers? Because this is actually from a Guardian article, Nepal's once known for farming now exports its youth, Actually, back in 2003, the biggest export was garment. And now, and obviously agriculture is another one. But now actually what's happening is Nepal is exporting its youth. If you see this figure, so this is quite in 2018. So most of the males, nearly 14% of the population works abroad, and they are mostly young male, below the age of 35. And most of these migrant workers, so they go to Malaysia and Gulf countries are where 88% of the migrant workers go. So they are in Middle Eastern Gulf countries, and Malaysia is where these young migrants workers go. And actually, like Nepal's economy is also based on the remittance often from these migrant workers. You can see over 25% of the country's GDP is based on migrants, this remittance from the migrant workers. I think it's quite high, if I am correct. Even countries like, other highest countries like migrant sending countries like Bangladesh, they have around 7%. So, but Nepal, like over a quarter of its economy is based on what migrant workers send from abroad. And when they go to like Gulf countries in Malaysia, what they do is they engage in 3D job, difficult, dirty, and dangerous. And you can see this worker with a little safety harness, working in this extreme heat in this condition. And probably you have heard about, the Gulf, the World Cup coming, and the Gulf, the stadium in Qatar, and the condition of the workers in there. I think you have already read stories about that. And this is the official figure, which suggests that around 8,000 deaths happened in the last 10 years, mostly in Gulf countries and Malaysia. But these and experts say this is very underestimation, because this is just the figure which is compensated by the government, but most of the deaths are not compensated. If the death happens outside the workplace, they are not compensated, and this figure is actually underrepresentation of what's happening with the Nepalese migrant workers abroad. So we aimed this to work with migrant workers to co-produce storytelling, like culturally adaptive storytelling intervention with working with Nepalese migrant workers and families. So I won't be going through the details finding of the study because we don't have time. Maybe that's for the next seminar, but quickly going briefly. So the study took place in Dading, which is close, one of the district with highest workers migration rate of migration, and then Kathmandu. So we work with outgoing and returning migrant workers, their families, and NGO representative, government representative, and other related stakeholders. So there are several work packages. Obviously, we don't have time. So the first work package, what we did was what is the health and well-being issues of Nepalese migrant workers, so we did a systematic review, we did a qualitative study, we did a survey. The review is already published if anyone is interested. The qualitative study and survey actually is under review, and we hope to publish that soon. So that's work package one, first understanding the problem. And second one is because we wanted to develop culturally sensitive intervention. So the idea is to work so we wanted to explore how the story of migration is portrayed in Nepalese media and Nepalese literature, not the scientific literature, but Nepalese stories, songs, poems. How do they portray those kind of stories of migrants, their health and well-being? So this was very hard because Nepal is not a very technically developed country. We didn't have any central database of books and things, so we had to go on foot to different libraries. We had to contact writers, it was a little bit challenging. And we went through all the resources we got. So we allocated 3 months time, and whatever resources we got, we went through all the books and the novels and the songs and the stories, and we tried to derive theme from these resources. So that was from the literary resources. And the third work package is combining the finding of the first work package and the second work package. We kind of work with migrant workers to build a meta-narrative, build a story to address the health and well-being issues of these workers. So we did a couple of story writing workshops with them, and it was because it was a co-production, it was quite a iterative process, going back and forth. It was not very linear. So and at the end, we kind of we came up with working with the migrants. It's actually written, the story is written by the migrants themselves. Obviously, we had mental health experts a psychologist, and obviously a literary person on the team, but the story itself is from the migrant worker themselves. And we produced a storytelling video, which we have at the moment. You can actually look at the video in the project website, as I mentioned. We haven't disseminated this broadly because we are in the process of negotiating with Nepalese government to incorporate this storytelling video. So it's about a protagonist called Suman who goes abroad, and then he suffers with his mental well-being, and how he addresses that problem, and he comes back home, and it's a positive ending story. So we are in the process of liaising with the Nepalese government to incorporate in the pre-departure training work package this video. So we haven't done active dissemination yet because we are still talking with the government to include this video. So that's that. And quickly, I know I am aware about the time. Quickly, 2 minutes quickly on, and that's our big, I would say this is not a massive project. I think we had around 55,000, and the work took place in just in 1 year. So it is possible, even it doesn't have to be a massive £1 million project to do things you're passionate about. And I'm very, very proud of this project. And we had a wonderful team. I think one of the best thing is to have a team, very supportive team, and I think we had amazing team. And we did symposium in the UK, we did symposium back in Nepal. Nepalese researcher came to the UK to present, and vice versa. So it was very, very successful project. And another project quickly, just 2 minutes. So recent project, which was funded by RKSS, it was funded as a part of rapid response when COVID happened in the beginning of 2020. So it was funded as a rapid response project. And the idea came from, because when I was looking at the time, there was no proper resources for ethnic minority communities. When I looked at the information, they are mostly in dominant language, lacking cultural nuance. So this project aimed to actually develop and implement culturally appropriate resource on COVID-19. And we worked with, because it was not possible to work with all ethnic minority communities, obviously that would have been wonderful, but we focused on Nepalese and Indian participants, given the already existing networks. It was done in KSS. Again, this project had a multiple work package. We first did qualitative interviews with 24 participants, then we worked together with participants to design the resources, design the educational resources, and then we implemented. Still the implementation process is going on, and I think it will be ongoing. So these are some nicely colored leaflets, and there is video as well. You can find the details of the project in the website that mentioned below. So it was again very, very wonderful experience. And what we tend as a researcher, I think it's really important to work with the participants, no matter it's a survey, no matter it's a qualitative research. It doesn't have to be co-production in any kind of research. I think it's so important to work with researchers. And we had so many little things. For example, like in COVID, when you say why you throw the used tissue in the bin, the government guidelines says. But in Nepal, when I was working with participants, the Nepalese participants especially, they say they don't use tissue, they use handkerchief, and they have to. So direct translation doesn't work, because if you are translating from use the tissue in Nepalese, it doesn't make sense. So little things like that, it makes a lot of difference. And that's how we designed this leaflets, and it's been this has been very, very disseminated widely, and it not just in the UK, and it was in 20 different radio stations in Nepal. What next? We have several other projects in line, and I'll be working in minority and ethnic minority and migrants' health and well-being. And thank you very much for listening. I'm sorry, I might be a bit over the time. I really apologize. Thank you very much.
Oh no, that's perfectly fine. Don't worry about it, Priya. That's so fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing with us. the passion you have for your research topics really shines through. And I think you make some really important points about how I think a lot of people struggle to kind of look at what they've done and make any sense of it. And your idea of you can connect the dots. And if you find what you're passionate about and pursue that gives you the drive to move it forward. And like you say, that project that you talked about with migrants, that you kind of, you saw it in your life, you had the skills and you could build the team to do it. And actually to do it in a year with only a small sort of pot of money is just, really inspiring.
Thank you.
So if anybody has any questions or comments or thoughts about Priya, what she shared with us, please do feel free to put them in the chat, or like I said, at the very end, we can have a discussion together.